For centuries, this biblical phrase has been misunderstood, creating separation and spiritual elitism. Joel Goldsmith revealed something revolutionary. Being chosen is not about divine favoritism. It's about your willingness to awaken to a truth that's already present within you. The calling comes to everyone, but few choose to answer it with their whole being. The shocking truth is this: you are not waiting to be chosen by God. God is waiting for you to choose the path of spiritual consciousness. This isn't about worthiness or special selection. It's about your decision to move beyond the world of effects and enter the realm of cause. Every person receives the same divine invitation, but most remain distracted by external seeking. What makes someone chosen is their commitment to inner work, to silence, to practicing the presence of God moment by moment. Joel taught that this selection happens through your own spiritual dedication. When you turn within consistently, you discover you were never separate from the divine. The choice has always been yours to make, and today you can make it. Most people pray for God to change their circumstances, to fix their problems, to deliver miracles from outside themselves. This is why they remain among the many called, but never experience true transformation. Joel discovered that authentic spiritual power flows differently. It comes through realization, not through begging or pleading with an external deity to intervene. The chosen ones understand a mystical secret. God is not a person who decides your fate. God is the consciousness you embody when you awaken to your true spiritual nature. This means your healing, your abundance, your peace are not coming from somewhere else. They emerge from within as you align with infinite consciousness. This shift changes everything about how you approach life. When you stop seeking God's favor and start realizing God's presence as your own consciousness, you become one of the few who are chosen, not by divine whim, but by spiritual maturity, not by luck, but by understanding. Joel spent decades proving this truth through countless healings that occurred when people shifted from petition to realization. Here's what Joel taught that transforms everything. The kingdom of God is within you right now. Not tomorrow, not after you become more worthy, not when you pray harder. This present moment contains the fullness of divine presence. The chosen ones are simply those who stop postponing their spiritual inheritance and claim it through conscious awareness today. This requires a complete reversal of how you've been taught to approach spirituality. Instead of asking God for things, you rest in the awareness that God is already being itself as your very existence. Instead of trying to get somewhere spiritually, you recognize you are already there. The journey is not toward God, but as God expressing through your unique consciousness. Joel called this the practice of the presence. It means living each moment aware that divine consciousness is the only power, the only presence, the only reality. When this becomes your consistent state, not just an idea but your lived experience, you discover you are among the chosen. You chose yourself by choosing truth over illusion, presence over seeking. The technique Joel gave us is simple, but requires dedication. Several times each day, pause whatever you're doing. Close your eyes for just 60 seconds. Silently acknowledge, God is the only presence here, the only power operating. Don't ask for anything. Don't try to fix anything. Simply rest in this awareness. Let it saturate your consciousness like light filling a room. This is not meditation, not visualization, not affirmation. It's recognition of what is already true. In those 60 seconds, you're not becoming chosen, you're realizing you already are. The divine consciousness that created galaxies is the same consciousness reading these words through your eyes right now. There's no separation to overcome, only illusion to dissolve through consistent awareness. Practice this recognition throughout your day, before meetings, in traffic, while cooking, upon waking. Each time you do, you're strengthening your realization that you are not separate from the source. Within weeks, you'll notice circumstances shifting, not because God finally heard you, but because your consciousness changed. You became one of the few who chose to live from spiritual truth rather than material appearance. Let me share what happened to a woman named Margaret, who studied with Joel in the early 1950s. She had suffered from chronic pain for 7 years. Doctors found nothing wrong, yet the pain persisted daily. She prayed constantly, begged God for healing, attended every healing service available. Nothing changed. She felt abandoned by God, convinced she wasn't worthy of being chosen for healing. Then Margaret attended one of Joel's classes where he explained this principle. She realized she'd been approaching everything backward. She wasn't unchosen by God. She was choosing limitation by seeking healing from outside herself. That night, instead of praying for healing, she sat in silence for 20 minutes, simply acknowledging divine presence as the only reality. No asking, no pleading, just recognition. Within 3 days, the pain began subsiding. Within 2 weeks, it was completely gone. But here's what matters most. Margaret didn't just receive physical healing. She discovered her spiritual identity. She realized she had always been whole in consciousness, and the pain was simply her belief in separation made manifest. She became one of the chosen by choosing to see through spiritual eyes rather than material perception. Another student, Thomas, was facing bankruptcy in his business. He had 48 hours before losing everything he'd built over 15 years. He came to Joel desperate, wanting a miracle, wanting God to intervene and save his company. Joel told him something that seemed cruel at first. Your problem is not your business. Your problem is that you believe you have a problem. Thomas was angry initially. How could Joel dismiss his very real crisis? But Joel explained, in divine consciousness, there is no lack, no loss, no failure. These exist only in the material sense of life. If Thomas would stop trying to fix the problem and instead recognize the presence of infinite supply as his true consciousness, the solution would appear naturally through that awareness. Thomas spent those 48 hours not working on business plans, but sitting in silence, recognizing supply as a spiritual reality already present. On the final day, a former client he hadn't heard from in years called with an opportunity that not only saved his business but expanded it significantly. Thomas learned that being chosen means choosing to see reality from consciousness rather than from circumstance. This shift took him from panic to peace to prosperity. A third example shows how this principle works in relationships. Sarah had been praying for her husband to change for 12 years. She attended church regularly, did affirmations, visualized their marriage improving. Yet their relationship grew colder each year. She believed God wasn't answering her prayers, that perhaps she wasn't among those chosen to have a happy marriage. When Sarah encountered Joel's teaching, everything shifted. She stopped praying for her husband to change. She stopped seeing him as the problem. Instead, she began practicing the presence of love as a spiritual reality, not dependent on his behavior or her feelings. She would sit quietly several times daily, recognizing that divine love was the only presence in her consciousness, in her home, in her marriage. Something remarkable happened over the next 3 months. As Sarah's consciousness changed, her husband naturally responded differently. Without any words about spirituality or any pressure to change, he became more attentive, more affectionate, more present. The marriage transformed because Sarah stopped seeking change from outside and instead embodied the love she wanted to experience. She chose to be chosen by living from spiritual truth rather than material appearance. These 3 stories reveal the pattern Joel discovered in thousands of cases. Physical healing, financial restoration, relationship transformation, all emerge from the same principle. When you stop seeking God's intervention and start recognizing God's presence as your own consciousness, you move from the many called to the few chosen. Not because God changed, but because you did. The critical shift is from petition to recognition, from seeking to realizing, from trying to become to acknowledging what already is. This doesn't happen through positive thinking or mental tricks. It requires genuine spiritual perception, seeing beyond the material appearance to the divine reality underneath. Joel proved repeatedly that this shift in consciousness produces tangible results in the visible world. Each of these people spent weeks, not days, developing this awareness. Margaret practiced 20 minutes daily for 2 weeks. Thomas spent 48 hours in concentrated recognition. Sarah dedicated 3 months to consistent inner work. The chosen ones are those willing to invest time in consciousness rather than demanding instant external changes. They understand that spiritual realization precedes material demonstration. If these transformation stories inspire you to explore your own spiritual choosing, like this video to help others discover these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your current journey. Beyond the basic practice, Joel taught a complementary technique he called the beholder. This means you step back from your thoughts, feelings, and circumstances and simply observe them without judgment or resistance. You become the witness of your experience rather than being identified with it. From this place of detached awareness, you recognize that the real you is the consciousness beholding, not the conditions being beheld. When anxiety arises, instead of fighting it or being consumed by it, you become the beholder. You observe, there is anxiety appearing in consciousness. You don't claim it as yours. You don't battle it. You simply watch it from the position of pure awareness. This subtle shift removes the power from the emotion because you're no longer feeding it with identification. You're recognizing yourself as the consciousness in which experiences arise and fall. Practice this throughout your day. When frustration appears, behold it. When worry surfaces, behold it. When physical discomfort manifests, behold it. Each time you do, you're strengthening your identity as consciousness itself, rather than as the victim of circumstances. This is another dimension of being chosen. You choose to identify with the eternal witness rather than with temporary conditions. Joel also taught what he called the secret of the locked door. This refers to the practice of closing your door, literally and figuratively, to commune with the Father within. In our modern world of constant connectivity and endless distractions, this practice becomes even more critical. The chosen ones are those willing to disconnect from the world regularly to reconnect with source consciousness. This doesn't mean long hours of meditation. Joel recommended multiple short periods of inner communion throughout the day. 5 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes at lunch, 5 minutes in the evening. During these periods, you're not thinking about your problems or making mental lists. You're resting in the awareness of presence, allowing divine consciousness to fill your being without agenda or effort. The locked door represents your willingness to shut out the world's claims, opinions, and demands temporarily. In that sacred space, you're not trying to get anything from God. You're not even trying to be spiritual. You're simply being aware that in this moment, consciousness is all that exists. This regular practice builds a foundation of inner peace that circumstances cannot shake. Another powerful technique Joel shared is releasing the pairs of opposites. Most people live trapped between good and bad, health and sickness, abundance and lack, success and failure. They pray for the good and fight against the bad, but Joel revealed that both sides of every pair exist only in the material sense of life. In spiritual consciousness, there are no opposites, only the infinite presence of God being itself. When you find yourself hoping for good to come or fearing that bad will happen, stop. Recognize that both are mental concepts, not spiritual reality. Health is not the opposite of sickness in consciousness. Health is the recognition that wholeness is the only truth. Abundance is not the opposite of lack. Abundance is the awareness that infinite supply is the nature of divine expression. You're not choosing one over the other. You're seeing beyond both. This practice requires vigilance because the world constantly reinforces duality. Every news report, every conversation, every advertisement tries to convince you that opposites are real and you must choose sides. The chosen ones are those who refuse this trap. They see through the appearance of opposites to the underlying unity of spiritual reality. This vision liberates them from the endless battle between positive and negative. Joel taught one more essential practice: living by grace. This means recognizing that your good does not come through your efforts, your worthiness, your hard work, or your clever strategies. Your good flows naturally from consciousness itself when you stop blocking it with beliefs in limitation. Grace is not something God gives to favorites. Grace is the natural overflow of spiritual awareness, unobstructed by material beliefs. To live by grace, you must release the belief that you must earn, deserve, or work for your spiritual inheritance. This doesn't mean you become passive or lazy in the world. It means you stop believing that your actions create your good. Your actions express your consciousness, but consciousness itself is the source. When you align with this truth, right action flows naturally and effortlessly. Practice this by noticing when you're straining, forcing, or manipulating to make things happen. In those moments, stop and breathe. Recognize that infinite intelligence is already operating, already arranging, already providing. Your job is not to make it happen, but to allow it to happen through your awareness and cooperation. This is how the chosen ones live, resting in grace while remaining actively engaged in life. Now let's address what happens when you practice these principles and nothing seems to change. This is where most people give up and conclude they're not among the chosen. But Joel warned about this crucial period he called the testing time. When you first shift to spiritual consciousness, your old mental patterns don't immediately disappear. They rise up stronger, trying to convince you that this approach doesn't work. During this testing time, appearances may actually seem to worsen. Physical symptoms might intensify, financial pressure might increase, relationships might become more strained. This is not evidence that the principle is false. It's evidence that you're challenging deeply rooted beliefs and they're fighting back. The material sense of life resists spiritual awareness because they cannot coexist in the same consciousness simultaneously. Joel advised students to persist through this period without wavering. Don't judge the truth by temporary appearances. If you've been believing in limitation for 30 years, that belief structure won't dissolve after 3 days of practice. It requires consistent, patient recognition of spiritual truth despite what your eyes show you. The chosen ones are simply those who refuse to quit during the testing time. Another common challenge is what Joel called taking on the world's beliefs. Even as you practice spiritual consciousness, you live in a world that bombards you with messages of fear, lack, sickness, and limitation. Every news broadcast, every casual conversation, every advertisement reinforces material beliefs. If you're not vigilant, you'll unconsciously absorb these beliefs and wonder why your practice isn't working. The solution is developing what Joel called spiritual immunity. Just as your body can become immune to certain diseases, your consciousness can become immune to the world's limiting beliefs. This happens through consistent recognition that only God is power. When you hear about economic crisis, you don't fight it or fear it. You simply recognize that has no power in spiritual consciousness. When someone tells you about their illness, you feel compassion but don't accept disease as reality in God. This doesn't mean you become cold or unfeeling. It means you refuse to give power to appearance. You train yourself to see through material claims to the spiritual truth underneath. This takes practice and can feel awkward at first. But over time, you develop a consciousness that remains undisturbed by the world's chaos, not through denial but through realization. A third challenge many face is impatience with the process. You want healing now, abundance now, peace now. When it doesn't manifest on your timeline, you doubt everything. Joel addressed this by explaining that spiritual demonstration operates on consciousness time, not clock time. A shift in consciousness might manifest instantly or might take months to appear in visible form, depending on how deeply rooted the limiting belief is. He used the example of pregnancy. From conception to birth takes 9 months. You cannot rush it or force it. Spiritual realization works similarly. The moment you truly realize a spiritual truth, conception has occurred. But the gestation period varies. Some demonstrations are born quickly, others need time to develop. Your impatience doesn't help. Your trust and continued recognition do. The chosen ones learn to live in the now, satisfied with the consciousness itself rather than desperate for the demonstration. They know that consciousness is cause and manifestation is effect. When the cause is established, the effect must follow. Their peace comes from knowing they're living in spiritual truth, whether or not the visible world has caught up yet. This patience is actually power, not passivity. The final major obstacle is spiritual pride. Ironically, as you begin experiencing results from these principles, ego can creep in. You start thinking you're more chosen than others, more advanced, more spiritual. This subtle arrogance actually blocks further progress because it reintroduces separation. You've simply created a new form of material identity, a spiritual ego that believes it's special. Joel warned strongly against this trap. The moment you think you're chosen because of your spiritual attainment, you've missed the entire point. No one is more chosen than anyone else. Everyone has equal access to divine consciousness. The only difference is who has recognized it and who hasn't yet. And that recognition isn't a trophy you earned. It's a gift you received by being willing to look within. Stay humble in your practice. When healing occurs, don't credit yourself. When abundance flows, don't think you manifested it through your power. Recognize that consciousness itself is the healer, the supplier, the transformer. You're simply the transparency through which it operates. This humility keeps the channel open. Pride clogs it. The truly chosen are those who know they're nothing in themselves and everything in God. If these challenge-breaking techniques resonate with your spiritual journey, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced consciousness practices, and comment which obstacle you're most ready to overcome right now. Let's explore how this principle operates in advanced daily situations. Consider the workplace where you face difficult colleagues or demanding bosses. Most people pray for God to change the other person or remove them from the situation. But Joel taught that every person in your experience is appearing in your consciousness, which means they're there to reveal something about your own state of awareness. When a difficult coworker appears, instead of resenting them, use this technique. Recognize that divine consciousness is the only presence where that person is. Don't try to change their behavior. Don't mentally argue with them. Simply see through their human appearance to the spiritual reality underlying it. As you consistently hold this awareness, one of two things happens. Either they change naturally, or they exit your experience entirely. A man named Robert practiced this with a boss who made his life miserable for 2 years. Instead of quitting or fighting, Robert spent 3 months seeing his boss as spiritual consciousness rather than as a tyrant. He never spoke about this to anyone or tried to manipulate the situation. Within 4 months, the boss was transferred to another division. Robert learned that being chosen means choosing to see everyone through spiritual eyes, even those who challenge you most. In family relationships, this principle becomes even more profound. Your spouse, your children, your parents often trigger your deepest wounds and strongest reactions. Most people try to fix their family members or wish they were different. But Joel revealed that your family members are your greatest spiritual teachers, showing you exactly where your consciousness still holds limitation. A woman named Diana used this with her teenage son who was rebellious and failing in school. She stopped nagging, stopped threatening, stopped trying to control him. Instead, every time she thought about him or saw him, she practiced recognizing the Christ consciousness as his true identity. She didn't tell him what she was doing. She simply held this awareness consistently, sometimes dozens of times per day. Over 6 months, her son transformed. Not because she manipulated him through spiritual techniques, but because her consciousness changed. As she stopped seeing him as a problem and started recognizing his spiritual wholeness, he naturally responded from that higher level. His grades improved, his attitude shifted, their relationship healed. Diana became chosen by choosing to see her son as God sees him, despite all evidence to the contrary. Financial challenges provide another arena for advanced practice. When bills pile up and money seems scarce, panic is the natural human response. But Joel taught that the chosen ones respond differently. They recognize that supply is spiritual, not material. Money is simply a symbol of the infinite abundance that already exists in consciousness. When you realize this, supply flows through unexpected channels. A businessman named Frank faced this when his income suddenly dropped by 60%. He could have panicked, cut everything, scrambled desperately. Instead, he practiced recognizing infinite supply as his consciousness for 30 minutes each morning and evening. He didn't visualize money or affirm abundance. He simply rested in the awareness that consciousness itself is full, complete, lacking nothing. Within 8 weeks, 3 new income streams appeared from completely unexpected sources. He didn't hustle more or work harder. He aligned his consciousness with spiritual abundance, and form followed. Frank learned that being chosen in the financial realm means refusing to accept material appearance as reality, and instead recognizing supply as an infinite spiritual truth always available to consciousness that realizes it. Health challenges in chronic or serious conditions require this advanced understanding. When doctors give dire diagnoses, or when pain persists despite all efforts, spiritual consciousness becomes your only true resource. Joel healed himself of tuberculosis through this principle decades before he taught others. He realized that disease exists only in the belief that life is material and vulnerable. In spiritual consciousness, wholeness is the only truth. A woman named Catherine was diagnosed with a condition doctors said was incurable and progressive. She was given medications that made her feel worse. After studying Joel's work, she made a radical decision. She would spend 1 year practicing spiritual consciousness before accepting the medical verdict as final. Every morning and evening, she sat recognizing the truth. God is the only life, the only presence, the only power. Disease has no existence in that reality. It took 11 months, but her symptoms gradually disappeared. When she returned to her doctors, they found no trace of the condition. They called it spontaneous remission, a medical mystery. But Catherine knew. Consciousness changed, and form followed. She became chosen not through special divine favor, but through choosing to identify with spiritual wholeness rather than material diagnosis. This is the ultimate demonstration of this principle in action. As we move toward completion, understand that living as one of the chosen becomes your natural state, not something you strain to achieve. After weeks and months of practice, recognizing spiritual consciousness becomes automatic. You stop trying to be spiritual and simply are. This is what Joel called dying daily to the material sense of life and being reborn into spiritual awareness. Your days transform when this becomes established. You wake already aware of divine presence. You move through challenges without losing your center. You encounter difficulties but aren't defined by them. You see through appearances to reality. You live from the inside out, rather than letting outside circumstances determine your inner state. This is true freedom, the liberation that comes from choosing to be chosen. This doesn't mean you become perfect or never have human moments. It means you have a foundation that holds steady beneath the changing surface of life. When you forget and get caught in material thinking, you notice quickly and return to truth. When appearances scream limitation, you remember what's real. You become unmoved by the world's drama because you're anchored in something that doesn't change. The chosen life is marked by several characteristics Joel observed in mature students. First, a deep inner peace that isn't dependent on circumstances. Second, a naturalness about spiritual things, without the need to prove or defend or convince. Third, an ability to be in the world fully engaged, yet not controlled by it. Fourth, a quiet joy that bubbles up from within rather than being triggered by external events. These aren't things you try to develop. They're the natural fruit of consistent spiritual realization. As you practice recognizing divine consciousness as the only power and presence, these qualities emerge organically. You don't work on becoming peaceful. Peace reveals itself as your true nature when anxiety is seen as the illusion it is. You don't cultivate joy. Joy flows naturally when you stop looking to conditions for happiness. Other people begin noticing something different about you, though they might not be able to name what it is. You carry a presence that affects those around you without trying. Your consciousness of truth becomes a silent blessing to everyone you encounter. This is the real meaning of being chosen. You become a transparency through which divine consciousness operates in the world, blessing without effort, healing without intention, transforming simply by being. As you continue this path, you'll discover layers you didn't know existed. Just when you think you understand, a deeper revelation comes. This is natural and beautiful. Spiritual awakening isn't a single event, but an ongoing unfoldment. Each day brings opportunity to see more clearly, realize more deeply, embody more fully. The chosen ones are those who embrace this endless journey with patience and wonder. Joel taught thousands of students over decades, and he observed this pattern repeatedly. Those who persisted through the testing time, who practiced daily despite appearances, who remained humble yet committed, these were the ones who experienced sustained transformation, not because they were special, but because they chose consistently. They chose truth over appearance, consciousness over condition, spiritual reality over material sense. You stand at this same choice point right now. Everything you need is already within you. Divine consciousness is not separate from your awareness in this moment. The kingdom is at hand, not tomorrow. All the peace, all the abundance, all the healing, all the wisdom you seek is present right now in consciousness. The question is not whether you'll be chosen. The question is whether you'll choose to recognize what already is. So here is your invitation, not from me, but from truth itself. Begin today. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions improve. Not when you feel more ready. Today, pause and recognize divine presence as your own consciousness. Do this not once, but many times throughout your day. Let it become as natural as breathing. Watch what happens over weeks and months as this recognition deepens and stabilizes. Remember, you're not trying to become chosen. You're realizing you already are. Every person who has ever walked this earth has the same divine consciousness at their core. The only difference between the many called and the few chosen is the choice to recognize this truth and live from it consistently. That choice is available to you right now, in this moment, as you hear these words. Joel Goldsmith spent his life proving that spiritual consciousness heals, transforms, and liberates. He left these teachings not as theory, but as practical tools anyone can use. The results speak through thousands of transformed lives across decades. Now it's your turn. Choose to be chosen, not through arrogance or spiritual pride, but through humble recognition that God is the only presence where you are. From this realization, everything else flows naturally. If your understanding has expanded through these Joel Goldsmith revelations, like this video to help others discover this truth, subscribe for more transformative spiritual teachings, and comment, "I choose to be chosen," to declare your commitment to this path of consciousness.